House Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacted to the DACA decision earlier today.
The DACA decision is something that supports our values as a country. The Dreamers across the country enjoy more popularity than almost anyone, but this way is the American way, and we're very proud of it.
NBC News correspondent Leanne Caldwell joining me now. All right, it looks like we're having a problem with Leanne Shaw. We're going to go to Julia Ainsley. Julie, do we have you there?
You do. Hi, Allison.
Excellent. Thank you. Julia Ainsley saves the day. Very much appreciated. She is, of course, our justice correspondent at NBC News. Julia, would you talk to us a little bit more about today's ruling? So many people saying this is just a momentous day, but we know there is still much more to come.
Yeah, it was momentous, Allison. I walked by the Supreme Court shortly after the decision this morning, and there was a small but very mighty group of DACA celebrators there, of course, smaller than it would be under other historical decisions like this, simply because of the pandemic and the times we're living in, and the fact that the Supreme Court wasn't there themselves physically in the building to deliver this decision. We got this online. But really what this means is the way the Trump administration went about this, it has been decided now by Chief Justice John Roberts that the way they went about this using the Administrative Procedures Act was illegal, that they were not, the way they struck down DACA was not allowed. Now, what they didn't weigh in on, because they weren't asked to weigh in on, is whether or not DACA on itself is illegal, whether or not that decision by the Obama administration in 2012 to allow children who were brought to this country by their parents to stay here, whether or not that was an executive overreach. That has not been weighed in on. And so what the Trump administration could do now is go back to the drawing board and try to find another way to end DACA. But as you've just mentioned, this is a very popular program. It polls very well in the American electorate. So it might not be a smart thing for the Trump administration to do in an election year. But for now, these DACA recipients are breathing a sigh of relief, but we should know that there are other ways to end this, and there really always will be until Congress decides to take this up and make it a law. What DACA stands for is Deferred Action for childhood arrivals. That action would be deportation. It's just deferring that and putting that off. And so until Congress can pass comprehensive immigration reform, which they haven't been able to do in decades, it's always a question for these people, always a question for the Dreamers and for other immigrants who are here who want a pathway to citizenship.
A lot of people are wondering, Julia, what could happen now, what the Trump administration may decide to do. As you mentioned, of course, this is a popular program. The Dreamers are so popular that it may not be the decision that President Trump might want to make in an election year. But could he, for example, end DACA with an executive order the same way that President Obama started it with one?
Yeah, he could, really. I mean, but the fact is he didn't decide to take that route from the beginning. And the reason for that could be because of its popularity. Instead of issuing an executive order in 2017, like he said he would do during his campaign, President Trump pushed this off on his then Attorney General Jeff Sessions to try to make the argument that this wasn't legal, that they simply couldn't continue to defend DACA against lawsuits that they were seeing and challenges from states like Texas. But there is another side of this. If you're reading the tea leaves, you could think, okay, first, the president didn't want to use an executive order to start with. Why would he now? But there are some very conservative right-wing immigration voices that have been prevailing in this administration and growing since that time in 2017. You know that Stephen Miller, that is the proponent of building the wall, of curbing legal migration, of separating children from their parents at the border. We know that Stephen Miller's voice is very prominent in this White House. He's someone who has really hung on through all the ups and downs and the turning tables that we see at the White House. And we also know that Ken Cuccinelli, who is now the #2 at the Department of Homeland Security, has kind of whispered recently, and I've seen a few quotes from him where he has hinted that he would be in favor of putting in place something that would roll DACA back within 6 months, which is very similar to what they tried in the first place in 2017, but perhaps through an executive order. So we have to see which ones of these wins will prevail. But at this point, it does seem to be a sigh of relief for DACA, and we will see, where the course of this very turbulent year goes next.
Julia, I know there are still questions. I know that technically nearly 800,000 Dreamers who have been in limbo are still in limbo as they wonder about a permanent solution. But as of today, what does this mean for people in the DACA program?
Well, it means that they can continue to renew their status. And that matters so much, particularly if you are someone who, like all of these Dreamers are, going to college or in workforce. You want to be able to tell your employer, I can stick around. You can keep me on your payroll because I am here. So for those people, it means they can continue to renew, and that makes a world of difference for them.
Julia, Chief Justice Roberts was the swing vote in 2 landmark decisions this week against the administration. He wrote the majority opinion today. What does this tell us about his role on the Supreme Court?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Chief Justice Roberts technically appointed to be seen as being on the conservative side of the bench, but there are many times where he will fall into this more moderate position. We saw Neil Gorsuch, who was the first Supreme Court justice appointee by Trump, actually go on the more liberal side earlier this week with another decision in which he was the majority writer. And so we're seeing kind of a shift right now in what we would typically think of as conservative opinions. But of course, conservative on the court doesn't always equal Republican policies. But what is interesting, I think, is that these justices on the conservative side did not want to box themselves in by saying that the Trump administration was going too far by striking down DACA, because there's this whole argument, really, which administration wants to argue that the other one went too far. And so we see both sides are very nervous to get near that argument of what is executive overreach when it comes to immigration, because there really is a wide latitude.
Julia Ainsley, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacting to the DACA decision earlier today.
The DACA decision is something that supports our values as a country. The Dreamers across the country enjoy more popularity than almost anyone, but this way is the American way, and we're very proud of it.
NBC News correspondent Leanne Caldwell joining me now. And Leanne, what are lawmakers on Capitol Hill saying today about this decision from the Supreme Court?
Well, you heard from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She was thrilled, and that's the opinion of most Democrats. The Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, was on the floor of the Senate this morning. And when he started speaking, he said that he had just previously broke down in tears. He was so happy with the decision. And then as he was speaking on the floor, he got emotional. So Democrats overwhelmingly are thrilled at this decision. On the other hand, Republicans have been working for decades now to tilt the Supreme Court in their direction. That's the reason many say that President Trump was elected, because of the Supreme Court to get these conservative justices on the court. And so they were extremely disappointed in the decision today. They were extremely disappointed in Chief Justice John Roberts and where he came down on the decision. And so it was not a great day for the president, Allison, and not a great day for Republicans and the Senate, especially, who have been working to confirm and nominate these conservative judges for many years.
Leanne, we know this is not a permanent solution here. Is there talk yet of new legislation to ensure protections for the Dreamers and for DACA?
That's one thing that both sides are saying, that now that means that Congress has to act and that the only fix is a legislative fix. But we are in an election year. They tried that already. They've tried that multiple times, actually. and it has gotten nowhere. You know, the president was very close to a DACA deal in his first year in office, but it fell apart. And so the closer we get to this election, the more unlikely it's going to happen. So I don't expect that to happen this year, but it is something that both sides of the aisle say is going to be necessary, as the Supreme Court has now put it in the hands of Congress, Allison.
Leanne, another big topic on the Hill this week, the House Democrats' police reform bill. It's heading to conference with the Senate next week. Republican senators, of course, have their own bill. I think we all want to know, is there any chance that we will see some sort of compromise on this before the July 4th recess?
We are super early in the process, Allison. And so what we are expecting to see is the House to vote next week. The Senate is expected to take up their version, the Republican version, next week as well. In the Senate, the process is going to be much longer. It could take over a week to get through this process. We don't know yet how the parameters of the debate are going to look, how many amendments they're going to allow. These are things that Mitch McConnell controls. Democrats haven't even agreed yet to move on to the bill. They are trying to determine if they're going to block it. Because remember, to do anything in the Senate, you need 60 votes. Republicans only have 53 members, so they need at least seven Democrats to move on to any legislation. So we are very early on in this process. We could see it pass the House of Representatives next week. We could see it pass the Senate in the next couple weeks, the Republican bill. But then both sides would have to come together. One promising sign, though, Allison, is Speaker Pelosi told our own Garrett Haake today that she would support going to a conference committee. That means where the House and the Senate get together with their different bills and negotiate it out at the end of the process. So that was a nod to Senate Democrats to say, go through the process in the Senate. Let's see where we land.
Leanne, I know it is still very early in the process, but both parties have agreed there needs to be police reform. It seems like that's a good sign from the speaker saying that, they would be willing to go to conference. I know we do have a long way to go. And then, of course, Garrett was telling us just the other day, there are all of these issues of the recesses coming up and time off. And then all of a sudden you're right in the heat of the election. And it seems like timing could be an issue here.
Timing is absolutely an issue. And the Democrats and Republicans are still extremely far apart on this issue. Their buckets are the same. They address the same buckets, but there's some major differences, including, Democrats want these national standards on chokeholds and no-knock warrants. Republicans want to study no-knock warrants, and they want to try to limit chokeholds by controlling the federal money that goes to police departments, this entire issue of qualified immunity. They disagree on the funding. Republicans give police departments more money to implement new training and de-escalation tactics. Democrats, they are, inching closer to the left on this issue and not giving the police departments new money to implement these changes, saying they have enough money. So there's a lot of issues that both sides have to work out. We'll see if there is the political will to do it. There's a lot of momentum right now, and it does seem that both sides want to get to an answer. But are they going to demand perfection in order to allow things to pass, Allison? There's still a long way to go.
All right. It seems like there is quite a long road ahead. Leanne Caldwell, always great to see you. Thank you.
You too.
The Supreme Court's decision is good news for thousands of young people who rely on DACA for protection, job opportunities, and education. NBC News correspondent Jacob Sobroff joins me now. He is also the author of the upcoming book, Separated Inside an American Tragedy. It is about the Trump administration's family separation policy. It is due out July 7th, and we are so excited to read it. Jacob, you can pre-order it now. You have been covering this story for years. How are Dreamers reacting to the decision today?
Well, it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in fact, Allison, who are in the same boat and have basically been given a reprieve from the possibility of being deported to a country that they've never known. The vast majority of Dreamers come from Mexico, and the vast majority of dreamers are right here in the city of Los Angeles, in the greater Los Angeles area. And when you talk to folks who are in this position, every one of them will tell you that they're here by no fault of their own. They were brought here by their parents as young children, and they've made their lives in the United States of America as Americans without that label. Here in Los Angeles, they're Angelinos, they're Californians. They just don't have that title of citizen. Every other aspect of their life, though, could be described as citizenship. Positively contributing to society, making wonderful friends. And in fact, Jose Aguilar, a young man who is a barista at a coffee shop not far away from here in my neighborhood in L.A. I've gotten to know over the course of the last couple of years. He revealed to me many years ago that he was a dreamer. After seeing some of our reporting, we were talking about it. I wanted to know from him, getting to know him as a person and not as an activist or under this label of dreamer. What is it like to live life with this label? And here's what he told me. Take a look at this.
Continue living in fear. There's an invisible separation between myself and many people out there simply because of our legal status. I don't know what those people look like. It's not like something you walk around and share. And, not that I'm ashamed of, I'm very proud of where I'm at today because of my situation. I'm very proud to say that I was a full-time student and a full-time employee, and I got through all those crazy times in school and trying to work, and then at the same time driving home from work to home and hoping that I don't get pulled over.
Honestly, the other way to put it, Allison, is that he's just a regular guy. He's a regular guy like anybody that you or I know. Because of his circumstances, he has to fear on a daily basis getting picked up by ICE, immigration, and deported to a place that he only knew as a one-year-old. So he didn't know at all. And I just want to say quickly, I've been looking through tweets in response to the video that we put up earlier today from my conversation with Jose. And this is one of the things that one person responded. Jose has been my best friend for 12 years, is the person I trust most in the entire world. I'm so happy for him. He deserves all good things. And she added, so proud of all dreamers who continue to push forward despite all that has tried to hold them back for so damn long. And that's right. This has been holding people back for a very long time. It's been this weird limbo status. And now today, at least, they can breathe a sigh of relief and get back to the drawing table and figure out, how to make their lives permanent here in the United States.
Yeah, Jacob, let's talk about that, because I don't want to be the downer here, because there is a lot for folks to be celebrating today. But let's talk about the concerns about potentially what the president could do in response to this decision today, and then the concerns about the fact that this does not make DACA a permanent program.
That's correct. So, this is not, as we've heard from people who are far more versed in legal analysis than I am, this is not a permanent solution to DACA. This is the Supreme Court saying the way the Trump administration attempted to get rid of the program was not constitutional. And so what they're going to do themselves is go back to the drawing board and figure out, if they so choose, how to get rid of this program. That's up to the Trump administration. That's a political calculation that they'll have to make. But in the meantime, folks that I talk to all the time, like immigration lawyers, are now using this time period to try to get in DACA renewals, to put people into the program who may have been barred from entering it during this period of time when DACA was tied up in the courts. That's what's so interesting to me about this, is what happens to people currently in the program who are eligible to be in the program and apply for the protections of the program right now, in between the time the Supreme Court has made this decision and the Trump administration decides to do what's ever next. And I've already seen indications, as I said, from people in immigration law and activism that is to move full steam ahead to get people the protections that this executive action from the Obama administration affords.
Jacob Soboroff, thank you so much for being on, and I'm very much looking forward to reading the book.
Thanks, Allison.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.